Hello, yes, that's right. It's Joe here live for Joyrider TV, back with some more scintillating Q&A where I'm going to be looking at answering your most pressing catamaran sailing concerns. Oh, yes. Now, if you hadn't heard, there's something new on totaljoyrider.com, and that is that you can now sign up for the Joyrider TV newsletter. Oh, yes. If you want me in your inbox every couple of weeks, then sign up. If you're in the live chat, then just scroll to the top of the live chat. If you're watching this later, then just have a look in the video description below and you'll see a link, and click on the link, give us your email address, and there I'll be in your inbox. Exciting times. As advertised, I'm just going to kick off by looking at different types of catamaran hull shape and what is the point of all of these different types of hull shape on a catamaran. Why do they work? Why don't they work? Some of them. And shall we just jump in? And then after that, I'll check in with everybody who's checking in live. Should we do that? Let's do that. So these are the four most prevalent types of hull shape that we get on catamarans. Now, let's start off with the top one. So the top one is what we call the asymmetric hull. If you hadn't worked it out, this is the view of the hull from the side, and this is the view of the hull either from the back or the front, looking down the section. So two main elements we need in our hull shape. One of them is we need something that is going to stop the boat from slipping sideways. If you think when we're sailing along, the wind is generally coming at some point from the side, which if the boat was just rounded like a dish, it would just slide sideways. So we need something to stop that leeway or sideways slide. So what we've got on the Hobie 16 or any boat with an asymmetric hull, like a Prindle 18, Prindle 15, Prindle 16, Hobie 14, the old classic Hobie 13, nice choice, and many others, which at this time I can't list. We need to have this leeway prevention device, which on these boats with the asymmetric hull, the outside of the hull is completely flat, like a board, completely flat, and the inside of the hull is curved. Now, it's that flat outside of the hull which gives us that resistance against the water, which stops the boat from sliding sideways. So that is our leeway prevention device. Device number two that we need is some sort of pivot point. So when we want to tack the boat, we need a point on the hull which the boat is going to kind of rotate on, making the tacking either easier or more difficult. Now, as we know, asymmetric hulls were very popular longer ago. So the asymmetric hulls became popular because they were lower maintenance, more durable, and you could ride them up the beach. Those were some of the main selling points. The other one was that with the asymmetric hull came this more banana-like hull shape, which made these type of boats better for sailing in waves, because when you're coming down a wave, you could get your weight back on the boat, which would lift the front of the boat, meaning that you're less likely to plow the bow of the boat into the water. So on a boat with an asymmetric hull like this, where would be our pivot point? Well, it would not be particularly, what's the word, focused. It would be spread over quite a large area, which would, on this example, our pivot point would be like pretty much the whole thing, which is why boats with asymmetric hulls are generally much more difficult when it comes to tacking. Again, because of that lack of pivot point, it actually makes them more difficult to get going if you have stalled. So that is why the asymmetric hull, even though there must be tremendously cheap to build compared to the other types of hull, and very durable, great fun to sail, as anybody who sailed a boat with an asymmetric hull would know. But the frustrations of the tacking difficulty means that the asymmetric hull is not as popular these days with the masses as some of the more modern hull shapes. The other element that we need in our hull is volume. That is, we need air in the hull, and the distribution of the volume is very important because that is what is going to stop the boat from nosediving. But at the same time, we don't want a load of drag at the front of the boat. So it's a very difficult balance in getting the volume in the hull absolutely right, so that there's minimal drag, less prone to nose diving, but still maneuverable. Tricky stuff. So on an asymmetric hulled boat, on all of them really, they don't have so much volume, which means if you do overpower the rig, they're a lot easier to nosedive because there's not much resistance at the front of the boat. Due to that lack of volume, also, they don't carry weight so well. What we want, if we're going to be putting a lot of weight on the boat, is loads of volume, because that means when we push down on the top of the hull, it's not going to sink down in the water so much, meaning it's not going to create that much drag. All right, everybody happy so far? I hope so, because we're coming on to the next one. So the next hull shape is called the skeg hull. Would we call it a skeg hull? Yes, we would. So this is the next kind of addition in user-friendly hull design. The most common boat with this sort of hull shape would be the Dart 18, but also other members of the Dart family, a lot of Top Cats, especially for those of you in Germany, and trying to think of other boats like the Nacra 500, boats like that, 570, and there's a lot of boats which have the skeg hull. What we're using on the Wild Wind Beach, we have the Hobie 15 and the Hobie Pacific. Now, the skeg hull is by far the most user-friendly hull shape there is. That is because we don't have the centerboard or the daggerboard, which we're going to come on to, which is another element that you have to worry about when you're sailing. But they've got a much more focused pivot point than the asymmetric hull, which makes them much, much, much easier when it comes to tacking. That is why the skeg hull is very popular. And with the skeg hull, basically, we can take pretty much any hull shape, and the skeg is just molded into the lower part of it. So there's, for the boat designer, there is a lot of scope for scope. Basically, they could do whatever they want with the hull shape, with the volume distribution, because the skeg hull designs are generally a bit more recent than the asymmetric hull designs. This was when boat designers had realized people want boats with a bit more volume. So the skeg hull designs generally have more volume than the asymmetric hull designs. What is our leeway prevention? Well, yes, it is the skeg. So if on the asymmetric hull, the boat would sink down into the water about that much, and then that bit is going to prevent the leeway. With the skeg hull, it's not going to sink down so much, but we've got that good sharp bit of skeg that's going to stop it from going sideways. Arguably, you could argue, that maybe that means that the asymmetric hull has got a better resistance to leeway than the skeg hull. So if we draw onto here our leeway resistance of the skeg hull, it would probably be something like that. That's what's going to grip against the water going sideways, because the bow of the boat is generally quite knife-like on these boats, which means that's going to help to stop the boat from slipping sideways. Whereas on an asymmetric hulled boat, all of that is going to be doing the same job. There we go. Interesting, I think you'll find. Very good. So next up, not necessarily the more modern design. In fact, the earliest beach catamarans did generally feature what we'd call the symmetrical hull. Yes, the skeg hull is symmetrical, but it's got a skeg. Whereas if we were to remove the skeg from the skeg hull, we'd have the symmetrical hull. Of course, the most famous being the Tornado, but there's many other types of boat with the symmetrical hull. The earlier F-18s would have this sort of hull shape, like the Hobie Tiger being the most long-standing of the earlier F-18 designs with this sort of hull shape. And older designs like the Prindle 18-2, the Prindle 19, there are so many skeg hull, symmetrical hull boats out there. The Nacra 6.0. Oh yeah, many types of, but for some reason the brain is not working quite so well just now. Anyway, so how does this work? Well, as we can see, firstly, by the hull profile, we've got a lot more volume generally in a symmetrical hull. So on a symmetrical hull boat, like the Hobie 21, Hobie 18, classic. Yeah, all in this category. Yeah, much more volume, so they generally carry weight better. But the big difference here with the symmetrical hull shape is we've got a centerboard or a daggerboard. What is the difference between a centerboard and a daggerboard, I hear you cry? Well, if we've got a centerboard, if that goes into the up position, it basically pivots and then it would go up inside the hull like this. So there'd be a cavity inside the hull. On a daggerboard boat, if I draw it on the one below, the daggerboard, when in the up position, comes out of the top of the hull. So the benefit of having a centerboard or a daggerboard is it gives a much more focused central pivot point. So the pivot point, getting confused with my colors, would be just this bit, because there is so much volume that the rest of the hull doesn't sit in the water. So this is our pivot point here, which means with a more focused singular pivot point on the hull, the boat is going to be so much easier to tack and maneuver, because we're not trying to drag the whole hull through the water. If you think like on the asymmetric, when we tack, we've got all of this. If this, how can we do this? If that's our water level, we're trying to drag all of that through the water. Whereas with a boat with a centerboard or a daggerboard, the hull is sitting on top and it's just the centerboard or daggerboard that that is in the water, allowing us to pivot. So leeway prevention, largely from the side of the centerboard or daggerboard. Also, by the way, some leeway prevention and lift is going to come from the rudder blade as well, of course, because that is water after all. And then the front of this kind of shape of symmetrical hull, generally quite knife-like at the front, not so much volume low down, which means all of that, when it's in the water, is going to help to stop the boat from sliding sideways. With this shape of hull also, we're likely to have more volume, if that's the front beam, more volume in this kind of area, which is going to help to prevent nose diving. And the extra volume in these hulls is going to mean that we can carry more weight on the on that type of boat. There we go. So although the modern F-18s and A-class boats are also symmetrical hulls, the modern boats have got a radical hull shape, which kind of looks more like an upside down hull. So if we just talk about what we've talked about with the others first, pivot point obviously is going to be, are we mixing up our colors now? Yeah, but does it matter? No, probably not. Pivot point is the daggerboard. Now, the benefit of the daggerboard over the pivoting centerboard, two things. One is from a boat building perspective, you don't have to have this big cavity in the hull. That's nice, because obviously to put a centerboard inside the hull, there needs to be quite a big space. But also with the more modern boats, daggerboards have been getting more high aspect. So basically, high aspect means tall and thin, low aspect, short and fat. Short and fat, less efficient, tall and thin, more efficient, less drag, more lift. That's how it is. The reason why the daggerboards have only in the last 15 years, let's say, been getting super high aspect is because before that, there didn't seem to be the need for them to be super high aspect, because to have a shorter, fatter daggerboard was much more practical, less likely to hit the bottom, less likely to damage it, more durable, it being shorter and fatter. Also, when you pull it up, you don't have as much above the deck. But when the F-18 class, for example, was getting more competitive, then the manufacturers said, I want my boat to go faster upwind. So by having a more high aspect daggerboard, rudder blade as well, as we can see here, we've got a rather delightful shaped rudder blade. That means the boat is going to perform better going upwind. So that is why the foils is generally a term for the daggerboards and rudder blades on the boat. There we go. Foils don't mean foiling where the boat lifts up out of the water. Foils are just the general term for these things that go under the water like that. So that is why we're going higher aspect on the more modern boats. Now, with this hull design, so we've got our pivot point, our leeway prevention is coming solely from the daggerboard and the rudder blade. That's our leeway prevention. Now, we're not getting any leeway of prevention really at all from the hull, because the hull has got so much volume at the bottom that it doesn't really sit into the water at all. So if we didn't have a daggerboard or a rudder blade, because there's no hull in the water, the boat would just go sideways. Absolutely sideways movement there from the hull. And that is another reason why we need such a long daggerboard, because that is giving us our leeway prevention as well as our pivot point. Now, you may ask, why do we have this hull shape at all? Well, one is it really exaggerates that pivot point, because you haven't got any hull sat in the water at all. So the boat really does tack like a monohull. So easy to tack, so maneuverable, because we're not dragging, like our example of water hull, we're not dragging any hull through the water at all. The whole of the hull is just on the surface of the water. No resistance there. Very nice. The other reason this hull shape has become popular is because people don't like nose diving. So by having loads of volume at the bottom of the hull, even at the front of the hull, so if we kind of, if this is our hull shape from above, exaggerated of course, that's the bottom of the hull, the top much more narrow. But because we've got all of that flat surface on the water at the front, it means it's very hard for that to get pushed into the water. Whereas on a boat where the hull is the other way up, where we've got less volume at the bottom and a very knife-like bow, very easy for that to go down, and then all of the volume is at the top. So that goes down, and then the volume at the top is there to stop it from diving in. Whereas on this shape, all the volume is at the bottom, so we don't even give it a chance to go in. And then finally, with this hull shape, the reason why the bow shape has gone kind of inverted and very smooth on the top is so it can really, sorry, there was a noise. So it can really dig through any waves rather than going over like this. It will just pierce the waves and go straight through. That is the theory. So I think that brings us on to, there we go. There are the 4 different types of hull shape which we are likely to find in most catamarans these days. All right, now going to check in with everybody who's checking in. Thanks for checking in and arriving. If you are checking in, by the way, do let us know where you are in the world. I think it's always interesting. We've got Mark and Janet on board in Ohio. Loved the twin Hobie cats, double the speed, double the fun. Yeah, we'll be having some more of that actually. I have got quite a lot of footage from the summer just gone that I haven't yet used. And yeah, I'm going to put together something kind of, let's call it feature length. If feature length is about 15 minutes, something nice, maybe for Christmas. Let's do that, shall we? It's just quite a bit of head scratching involved in how to put together just a load of clips to make it entertaining, because we need to be entertained. Hello to Benny in Sweden. He says, good evening, sailors. Leland Lee is on board in Clearwater, Florida. Thanks for coming, Lee. Always a pleasure. We've also got the Hull Flying Fin. Cheers from frozen North Finland. Oh, my word. Yeah, it must be getting... How many hours of daylight are you having at the moment? Is it around... excuse my ignorance, but is it around Christmas time when you really have the least daylight? That should be obvious, I know. Okay, we've got channel member Aaron on board in New Zealand. Good morning, Aaron. I hope that the day is shaping up well and there's some excitement on the cards down there. By the way, everybody in the Southern Hemisphere especially, there is still, how much would there be? Just over 2 weeks to go on the 2023 Global Speed Stick. So if you're going out sailing, take a GPS with you because you never know. You might just smash out a big speed. Get on the stick. And right, I'm going to lay it down now. Once we've reset the speed stick for 2024, I'm not going to be accepting any speeds that happened in 2023. So let's get those 23 speeds on the 23 stick. I don't even know if there's many Hobie getaways in the Southern Hemisphere, but if you're lucky enough to be able to get out on a Hobie getaway, you could still win the getaway challenge. Basically, if you can hit 20 knots on a Hobie getaway, that will put you into first place. The winner of the getaway challenge wins a Malcheski Composites Pro Joyrider tiller extension. Ooh. I should have brought one up really so I could showcase it maybe for next week for the Christmas special. Christmas special Q&A. God, the fun never stops on Joyrider TV, not even for the Christmas special. Bring your mince pies and your mulled wine. Very nice too. All right, we got Mr. Tony KP in Ebeltoft, Denmark. Still no sailing in dark and cold Denmark. Yeah, I dare say that's going to be the status for a little while yet. Yeah. All right, we've got Spicy Fist 1 on board. Somewhere in, hasn't even been that long since we did the feature, but somewhere in the northeast of England, I believe. All right, we got Ryan on board in Maui. Ryan is, of course, a channel member, as you can tell by his green font and interesting array of emojis. How's it from the Pacific? Nacra 500 skeg hull. Yep, the 500. In fact, if you were to ask me what skegged hull boat, this is having not tried one, by the way, would you go for if someone was to say, all right, you can have any skeg hull catamaran available on the market today, I would go for the Nacra 500 Mark II. That bad boy looks like serious fun. Why would I choose that over the 570? What my guess would be is the 570 probably better if you're going to be sailing with more people on board or more weight on board. But if you're sailing with up to, let's say, 140 kilos on board the boat, then the 500 is likely to not be that much slower than the 570 and smaller, more maneuverable, perhaps a bit more fun, a bit more nippy. That is, without having sailed either of them, that is what I would go for. Thank you, Ryan. All right, Mr. Tony KP says, what about an asymmetrical skeg hull design? Best of two worlds. Would that work? Oh, yeah. Gosh. Yeah, it'd be quite an interesting project. I think there are some boats out there which maybe have gone a little bit skeggy, where we've got a hull shape which, if it's flat on the outside to satisfy our asymmetricalness, and then something like that, that I think you might be onto something there. I think maybe that would go like very nicely indeed. Yeah, so anybody looking to design and build a boat coming soon. Let's have a go at that, I think. All right, Lee says thoughts on skid tape on the bottom of the hulls. Yeah, one thing I didn't mention actually, having said that, the asymmetric and skeg hulls, of course, are the best, the most durable. We didn't even talk about durability and strength, but these types of boats much stronger than these types of boats. These types of boats, you can run them up the beach. If it's a sandy beach, you could just drive it up the beach and the boat will be fine. Whereas with these types of boat, better not to, because one little stone and you put a hole in your boat. Whereas with these, the bottom is very, very hard. So Lee's saying, what about a skid tape on the bottom of the hulls? Yeah, it is quite popular that if, or it has been in the past, not if you're racing, but if you're a recreational sailor and you are running your boat up the beach a lot, even with a very durable shape, eventually, if you drag your boat up a sandy beach over again, that sandy beach is a bit like sandpaper. Eventually, you are going to be rubbing through the bottom of your boat. So on the bottom of the hull, if that's the bottom, you can put a sacrificial rubbing strip on the bottom like that. So if it was on a Hobie 16, just on the keel line like that, a sacrificial rubbing strip, which would basically be like fiberglass that you just glass onto the bottom of the boat, and that takes the wear. Yeah, if that is your situation, then yes, I think there's a lot to be said for that. All right, we've got Eves on board. Hello, sailors. Blue Bay Sailing Explorers from Mauritius. Very nice. Hope it's cooking for you out there in Mauritius. Yeah, obviously had a very good time sailing in the north of the island. Very good sailing conditions and the most ridiculous color of the water, even with just your what do you call it, your bare eyes, do you call it that? Just with your eyes, it looked like it had already been photoshopped. Amazing. And so warm, nice wind, great sailing conditions. Very nice place to go sailing. All right, Spicy Fist says, interested in those upside down type bows. How does that work? Yeah, I think maybe you put the comment after I explained how they work. So there we go. I think that's a done deal. All right, Eve says, do you get more speed sailing with one rudder down and the other one up on a Hobie Cat 16? Yeah, I think in competitive racing, I'd say 90% of the fleet are lifting the windward rudder blade for at all times, pretty much, because it does reduce some of the drag, you know, one rudder's worth of drag. And one of the reasons why lifting a rudder is popular racing Hobie 16s, but yet in F18s, Hobie Tornadoes, A-class boats like that, it's not necessary, is because on the Hobie 16, the boat twists. Even if you've got a very stiff Hobie 16, it's always going to twist a bit like this, the hulls, which means it is near impossible to get the alignment of the rudders absolutely perfect. So, which means when it twists, you're going to always get a bit of resistance from the windward rudder. So you can put it up and just reduce that amount of drag that you'd get from that kind of twist between the hulls. All right. So question I'm going to ask myself is, so if that is the case, I've noticed that you are very keen on going fast. Yes, I am. And in fact, on Sunday, big video coming out all about sailing fast, and some of very exciting, in fact, very exciting. But I'm not going to spill the beans just yet. But that will be at 8 o'clock, sorry, Greek time, which is 8, so that'd be 7 Central European time, 6 o'clock in the UK, and around lunchtime in the US. There we go. On Sunday, that will be coming out, a very exciting video about fast sailing. But back to the question. So, yeah, why don't I do the speed runs with the windward rudder up? It is from a safety perspective. There's two things, actually. I'm reluctant to rub this out. I think it's quite a nice looking board, but we'll keep those ones. So one reason that I'm not putting the windward rudder up on the speed run is because when the rudder is up, the tiller arm, this is the tiller arm, so that is actually joined to the rudder blade. The tiller arm comes very close to the back of the boat, and this is the spot where my back foot has to go. And that part of the tiller arm is very sharp. So even with good shoes on, it's choppy foot territory, and we don't like that. But that is the secondary reason of why I don't pull up rudder blade going for speed runs. So this back edge of the rudder blade, this is going to be quite obvious as soon as I say it. That back edge of the rudder blade is like a flipping razor blade. And the concern is, you know, everybody is prone to a little bit of getting it wrong at times. And if when on a speed run, something went wrong and you went round the back and you caught the back edge of the rudder blade somewhere you didn't want to catch it, that would be really, really bad. So that is why, main reason why I don't sail the boat on speed runs with the windward rudder up, because if I go swinging around the back, I don't want to be getting sliced up with that bad boy. That is the why. Good question. All right, Pierre is with us. Hello, Pierre. Good morning from Quebec, Canada. Always interesting. We try. I think it's actually the topic of catamaran sailing, which is interesting, and to be able to talk about it is a very good time. All right, Lee says thoughts on footstraps on a Hobie 16. Yeah, my thoughts on footstraps are no, not really. There's a few reasons why not, but one, it's because of the size of the hulls. And if you put a footstrap on the 16 here, even with the rudder in the up position, when you steer, the the tiller arm is going to catch on the footstrap. That is reason number one why not. Reason number two, if you're sailing in waves, flying a hull slightly, the footstrap is likely to be getting pounded by the water a lot, which is going to slow you down a bit. And those would be my big two reasons for why I don't favour footstraps on the 16. Don't get me wrong. When I'm sailing something like a Hobie Tiger or an F18 and I'm at the back of the boat, foot in the footstrap, I love that feeling of security that you get from the footstrap. But on a 16, because of the low volume and the low tiller arm, it just doesn't, it means it's not really practical. Any further forwards, you could put a foot strap like halfway between the pylon and the back of the boat. That might be quite useful, but it would be a very specific time when you'd actually use it and when it would be in the right position. Because the 16 and the Hobie 14, they're small boats, not much volume. It means that the likelihood that you're going to need to move backwards or forwards more often is greater, which means the chance of you getting that foot strap, toe strap in the right position is less. There we are. All right, we've got Alistair with us. Hello, Alistair. In Scotland. Nice. Must be getting pretty fresh up there right now. I used to have one of those original A-class cats, an Australis, whose hulls were pointed at the stern, which led to a very rocky ride because all of the buoyancy was at the daggerboards. Yeah. Volume is in the center of the boat. That means the boat is going to be seesawing a lot, which is why it's more popular to have the volume over a longer period, but more forwards. So then you can just get your weight forwards and it will never be so far forwards that you'll get that seesawing either side of the volume. You just be able to keep plowing it down. Hull Flying Fin says up north at Utjockey, the sun rises next time in the middle of January. Sorry about the pronunciation, by the way. Utjockey, middle of January. Gladly, I'm at the south of Finland, but way up north from Vasiliki. Yes. There we go. Wow. So no sun until the middle of January in the north. Wow. Okay, Ryan says I was looking for naked eyes. Thank you, Ryan. Unaided eyes from Tony. Nice. We got Joaquin on board, I believe, in Argentina. Hello, Joaquin. Glad you could make it. Rob says to put the rudder black down can be a pain in the rudder. Yes. That's another reason why I'm not favoring rudder up and down. But the guys at the sharp end of the fleet in the Hobies who are lifting the rudders have made an art form of putting the rudders back down when tacking or maneuvering. Very good. All right, we got Hans on board in Germany. Hello, catamaran sailors out there. Nice topic. Great. Glad you're enjoying it. Okay, I'm going to just jump into the preloaded questions department. The first one, this is a good question. You'll like this. This is from Nathan, who says, what is the worst thing to do when bailing? Bailing meaning jumping or falling off the boat. Yeah. So there's a few bad things to do. Since we've been talking about getting impaled on your rudder blade, one bad thing to do when bailing would be to get run over by your own rudder. That not always easy to avoid, but something to be aware of. If you have the choice, let's stay clear of that rudder blade. Number one. But the worst thing to do when bailing, if you're falling off the boat, whether you're alone or sailing with a crew, is to let go of the main sheet. If you let go of the main sheet, it means the likelihood of you becoming separated from your boat it's inevitable. You are going to be separated from your boat. And from all of the testing that I did the year before last, I think it was, the worst time to fall off your boat and not be holding on is actually in lighter winds, because in those light winds, there's not so much load in the rig that is going to pull the boat up into the wind. So the boat could just keep sailing indefinitely on the course which it was on when you fell off. So if you're not holding on, that boat is just going to leave you behind. And it's also lighter winds when it's more likely that you're not holding on because you're more relaxed. But what if you're so relaxed, you're having a bit of a lie down on the hull, and perhaps you just get hit by some sort of weird wave, maybe from a ferry, which is a little way off, or from something. Boat shakes, you roll off the side, and you're not holding on, boat sails off, doomed. Always hold on. Always be holding on to the main sheet. That is very important, I think. When it's windier, again, if you are holding on to the main sheet, means the boat isn't going to leave you behind. It takes a bit more commitment to hold on to that bad boy when it's windy. But if you're sailing alone and you fall off when it's windy, if you hold on to the main sheet, if it's strong wind, what will happen, as long as you don't let go, is as the boat sails away from you, you holding the main sheet will actually sheet the mainsail in, which means the boat will then capsize. And although a capsized boat is a bit of a pain, it's not life and death, whereas being left in the middle of the area of water with no boat could be a lot more dangerous than a capsized boat. So hold on to the main sheet. Boat will either stop or capsize. You can then get back to the boat. There we go. Good question there, Nathan. Thank you very much. If you are watching this not live, and you've got a preloaded question that you'd like to load up for next week's Q&A, because you're not able to make it here live, then just put it in the comments and I will respond next week in the Christmas special. Oh, yes. All right. Joachim says, floods are easing a bit round here, so we might have some sailing during the summer. Well, fingers crossed for you. Hope that everything calms down a bit, so life can continue as normal. Right, Pierre's on board. Hello, Pierre. Says, when do you set the daggerboard halfway down? All right, so in the very quick explanation of daggerboards is down for up, up for down, and half for half. What does that mean? Upwind all the way down, downwind not all the way up, but what we're looking for on the downwind is so that you've got the same amount of daggerboard under the boat as rudder blade. So if you want to get it absolutely nailed, get it completely correct, put your boat on its side. You only have to do it on one side. Put the boat on its side, measure how far below the hull the rudder blade comes, and then put the daggerboard into the same position, so it's the same depth under the boat. Put a mark above the deck where that is. You could even measure from the top to that mark, just in case that mark rubs out over time. And then that is how much daggerboard you would want for a downwind point of sail, especially if you're flying a spinnaker. And then if you are sailing on a reaching course, depending on how much wind there is, you'd perhaps lift the daggerboard. It wouldn't be exactly half. So if that's downwind, you'd probably lift it just slightly less for a reaching course, like 3 fingers less. Depends on the type of boat, of course. And then the other time when you'd have the daggerboard halfway up would be if you're sailing in strong winds and you're not necessarily racing, even on the upwind, bring the daggerboards up halfway, and it means the boat isn't going to be quite as prone just to every gust. The boat flies a hull quite aggressively. If you've got your daggerboards up a bit, the boat is going to become, you could call it a lot softer to sail. So bring the daggerboards up a bit when it's windy and the boat will be much more forgiving. There we go. All right, we got Max on board in Rosenheim, Germany. Good to have you with us, Max. I hope that everything is shaping up nicely there. I bet the German Christmas markets are really doing a great job. That is always a nice time, I have found. Although I've never been to a German Christmas market in Germany, only in Birmingham, England, interestingly. All right, we've got Mac Greener on board in Washington, D.C., where it's getting cold enough to freeze the dogs on chains. Ouch, that is a chilly pooch. All right, Lee says, nice point here, Lee. Please do remember to hit the like button. Very important. Yeah, it makes me have that warm feeling inside when I know that you've liked it, or at least you've hit the like button, whether you liked it or not. If you don't like it, hit the dislike button by all means, but just hit a button. Any button will do. Thank you. Thank you, Lee. All right, we've got Scott dropping it in the slot in Oregon, USA. Nice to have you on board, Scott. Hope it's all going well for you there. The whole Flying Fin says, what conditions would you suggest wearing a helmet? Yeah, I was never a helmet wearer. I was one of these young people who thought it wasn't very cool to wear a helmet. But a couple of years ago, I got concussion and it wasn't a good time. It was a miserable time, the concussion, really bad. And it lasted ages, like this spinning out feeling. And since then, I've been almost president of the Helmet Club. I would say now I put a helmet on whenever I feel that there is a reasonable chance of a capsize. So if it's so windy that you think there's a reasonable chance of a capsize, that is a sensible time to put the helmet on. Because if you've got a helmet, you don't want that to be sat in the trunk of your car or in your trailer or on the beach when you're busy smacking your head on the mast or the boom or something. So always better. If you even think, should I put the helmet on? The answer is yes. Because if you thought about it and then you don't, and you hit your head on something, you will feel like an absolute pillock afterwards if you thought about it and you didn't put it on. So if you thought about it, that means you've got to put it on. If the wind is so light that you're not even putting on a trapeze harness, then I think that's pretty obvious. Good question. All right, we've got Derek on board is that British Columbia in Canada. All right, Lee says also check out the Discord discussion. Yes, there is a Joyrider page on Discord. You can find the link in the description below. And it's a good opportunity if you want to keep chatting to other like-minded catamaran sailors using a live chat kind of feature over there. Yeah, jump in there. To be honest, I haven't been jumping in so much, but jump in. All right, Declan is with us. Hello, Declan. Good to have you with us. He's coming in from London today. Nice. Fish and chips, cup of tea, Mary Poppins. Very nice. Okay, into the next preloaded question. And this one comes from AA Ron 21 SE. I'm guessing that AA Ron sails a Hobie 21 SE. That's just a guess. He says, would you be willing to share your thoughts on how high to set the bowsprit tip after the pre-bend is on? Okay, so yes, we can talk about this. So a lot of the time, actually, when putting setting the height of your bowsprit, in fact, let's use this boat here. There's our bowsprit. Is that all in? Yeah. Sorry, look at what I'm doing. So there is some scope with the bowsprit. Bowsprit is another name for the spinnaker pole, to move it up or down. A lot of the time, the bowsprit ends up in a certain position just because the lengths of the lines that support it most likely reason that the bowsprit is going to end up in a certain position every time, even if it's not perfect, is because the bridle wires at the front of the pole, if they're a set length, they are going to determine how high the tip of the bowsprit is going to sit. If you've got adjustable lines on the front of the pole, or if you're making some new ones, then yes, we can adjust where the tip of the bowsprit will end up to be optimal. Now, what is going to make the height of the pole optimal? Well, what we want to do with the mast in the correct position, so when you've got your mast rake set up correctly, what we want to do is we want to measure the luff, the front edge of the spinnaker. So if the front edge of the spinnaker is, let's say, 7 meters long, so let's call that 700. Then we want the distance between the little block at the top of the mast, or if your boat is configured so you've got a block and then the halyard goes through a what would you call that, a bracket. So on some boats the spinnaker halyard would go up, would go through the block and then through this bracket. The idea of this bracket is so that the pull of the spinnaker isn't pulling on the center of the mast, because if it was to do that, it would affect your mast rotation. So when the spinnaker's pulling, it would be trying to pull the mast straight, which is why you might have this bracket on the mast. So if your halyard goes through the bracket, then you'd want to measure between the bracket and the tip of your spinnaker pole. And the want between there and there is be the length of the luff of your spinnaker, plus it will be something like 7 or 8 centimeters, which I believe would be, what is that, 0.1%? Is that 0.1%? I think it is 7 centimeters. And that will be the ideal distance to put between there and there. Because if you watched the recent video about how to get the correct luff tension in your spinnaker, that the amount of loose we want in the luff of the spinnaker is between, depending on how big the spinnaker is, that amount will be between about 6 and 10 centimeters, of course, depending on the type of boat. So if your pole takes that into consideration, then you'll have the tack of the spinnaker here and the head of the spinnaker up against the fitting on the mast. There we go. If we change our mast rake, that is, of course, going to change, because the distance between here and here, if we're putting the mast back more, that distance is going to get greater. There we go. All right, back to the live chat. And I think we'll make this our last question for today, because we've been going for 1 hour now. Before we go on to the last question, I'll just remind you, if you haven't yet signed up for the newsletter, oh yes, you can find the link either in the description below, or if you're watching live, just scroll to the top of the live chat and I have put it in there. There we go. All right, the whole flying fin says, does it matter support-wise if we watch the advertisements on YouTube or skip them as soon as we can? Oh no, that I used to think, sorry, I should read the rest. As soon as we can. Does the monetization come from views or minutes in the ads? Just want to support as much as I can. Very kind of you. But I used to think if people clicked on the ads, then I'd get paid more, or paid at least. But no, you don't even have to watch the ads. You can skip them as soon as possible. That is no problem. I think it's, just Google, who own YouTube, they put adverts before and after the video, sometimes in the middle. And as if the person making the video, me, says that's okay to do that, then I get a little bit of money from Google for having the advert there. But it doesn't matter if the viewer watches the whole ad or not. And what I've noticed as a YouTube viewer is if you don't skip the ad, they'll put on another one afterwards, which means you've got to wait again before you can skip it. So always skip the ads unless the ad is interesting. There we go. Okay, so Declan says, finally, awesome newsletter. He's already received it. So sign up for the newsletter, become a channel member if you want to support the channel. You get early access to all of the videos. And as I mentioned, this Sunday, we've got an absolute, big one coming out. So you'll want that one. I'm not sure when it's going to be ready. So your early access might only be a couple of hours or something, but I'll make sure that happens. So thanks very much for tuning in. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Stay safe out there, and I will see you soon with some more. And on Sunday, the video will be as a premiere, which means you can watch it with your fellow catamaran sailors, and there'll be live chat available there. All right. So thanks very much, and I'll see you soon with some more on Joyrider TV, because that's what I say.